we're sure that all of them are interested in the debate this evening, and they have lots of homework. So thank you for attending. Thank you. This time I'll ask the board to please be seated in the audience. My superintendent's message.
Thanks for staying, ladies and gentlemen. It's always fun to celebrate great academic success, and we have a lot of it. As a matter of fact, the College Board called me last week and wondered how we got so many kids to sit for the exam to congratulate us. And that's one of the reasons why it rewards high school and our kids do so well. It's just a wonderful thing. And there were actually more than them, some graduates who weren't really mentioned, who are National Merit Scholars, and we had 4 of them, I believe, across the state. And it's just a wonderful thing. So in the future, we'll bring more of our successes to you. This evening, my superintendent's message. I'm going to talk about the assessments. Actually, through this evening, our report tonight is on the assessment results, Regents results, and, appropriately enough, AP results. So my question up there is, what do the assessments now really mean in grades 3 through 8? And frankly, looking at what we see, talking to my superintendent colleagues, they don't mean a lot, and I'll point out why, but they do have some meaning. This past summer, we received letters from the state, the commissioner, and the chancellor, and I'll share those quotes with you. Because annually, at this meeting, we present and we compare results, present and past. However, you'll see why you're not going to get a lot of information on our assessments this evening and very few comparisons. And this is why. Board of Regents Chancellor Betty A. Rose said, while it's not possible to make direct comparisons of this year's results to past years, I'm cautiously optimistic the changes we're making will drive improvements in teaching and learning. The Commissioner, Mary Ellen D'Elia, said, while the content of the 2016 tests and last year's tests are comparable and similarly rigorous, it's not possible to make direct comparisons to the 2016 results to prior year's results because of the changes to the tests this year. Okay? That's from them, that's their quote, that's what we got this summer. So we're going like, we can't compare them, so how significant are they at this point? And there's a good indication that they'll change again next year. But here are some of the changes. They're trying to win the parents back, get more students present in the school to take the test. How are we going to get them back? Well, 5 years ago when Common Core came out, at the exact same time APPR came out, at the same time 2% tax cap came out. That's disaster. That's a perfect storm. Okay? Teachers' ratings were tied to exams all of a sudden. And there were brand new exams that were called Common Core. Altogether, a lousy layout, a lousy way to explain it to teachers. Forget what you've taught before, now you're going to learn a new way. And unfortunately, probably next spring, we're going to have new standards again. Not called Common Core, but called New York State standards. So they're going to learn that teachers will be receiving further professional developments, and we'll see different exams from this year's. But to get parents back in and buy into the test, get kids in the seats, they made changes this year. They're created by a new vendor called Questar. Sounds like a science fiction program a little bit, forgive me for that, but Pearson was the old exam. People began to hate Pearson. They got rid of them, burning Quest off. They reduced the number of questions on the ELA and math assessments, allowed students who were productively working on extra time to complete their exams. They contained input from teachers and administrators, input into the exams. The SED released more test questions than ever before and earlier than ever before to support instructions. About 75% of the questions they claimed, it's a little bit shy than that. Now, did all of these changes bring our parents back to school, our students back in the seats? No. And I'll share with you. Now, these are refusal rates. Now, I posted on top what the state said, which is a little misleading. In 2015, they said 20% statewide refusals. 2016 only went up 1%. 21% statewide refusals. But let's look on Long Island. I kind of purposely put us down below last, and I'll explain why I did that. That's the reason of that madness. Okay, Comstock. So you look at 86% refusal rate. 14% of their kids took the test, 3 through 8. Rocky Point, our neighbor, 81%. Connecticut, you can read the rest. Look at our neighbors. So what are you getting as far as results out of those tests when you have the biggest dropout rate you've ever had? Not dropout, opt-out. It's funny how dropout fits with that for me. We had 45% of our kids took the ELA. And do I have the right figures? Is that the old figure? Is that the old figure or the new figure? Those are refusals. Okay, so 45% participated in ELA, and 40% of our kids participated in it. And since we can't compare, I can't compare class to class. I can't compare how the kids did last year to this year because it's a different test, right? You just saw the differences in it. So what good are they? Is our refusal opt-out rate going to decrease next year? I think parents are still mad. I don't think they trust the state yet. Do I know what the state's going to do to get parents back to buy in? No, I don't. Okay? But I don't want to knock the entire exam. Is there something useful in that exam? Yes, there is. Teachers can go in and check their individual kids where their strengths and weaknesses are in math and ELA. They can do that. They can check their whole class. And if I were a teacher, I'd be doing that. Just to know where my kids are, use those exams. But how many kids in my class do I have that information on? Maybe half or less, based on those rates. So what is going to get the parents back finally? And I had a meeting with my fellow superintendents last Friday, and they don't think anything at this rate will get them back. But what are we worried about? And I'll be talking about this in a few minutes. The federal government requires 95% of your students to take the exam. 95%. What can they do to us? And you heard about this with the Commissioner King, because he was making some noise about taking our title money from us. Translating to Mount Sinai, our title money is $210,000. That may not seem like a lot to you, but it is to us in our budget, especially now with zero tax levy. Okay? So, we have to worry about getting 95%. Will they come down crashing? Would that put parents back in the seats with this level of anger and mistrust? I don't think so. I'm going to take your title one. Okay. What's next? Are you still going to get a test? What I wrote here is what they did. Easy math. Careless, rushed out, roll out with a Common Core, plus increase in state testing, more testing for kids. New teacher evaluation change, APPPR. Decrease in school funds, tax levy. Students with greater needs entering public schools equals anger and mistrust. Still exists. You just saw the rates. What will get them back? Somehow they have to get the test right. The new standards, they're out there for review now. Teachers, administrators looking at them, giving feedback to the state. They'll take that feedback, consider them, make more improvements, but next year might come up with another new exam and new standards based on all these recommendations. not called Common Core anymore. All right? Do you remember that rollout, that fear, all of that stuff going on, training all of our teachers, all the money we spent as a district on Common Core? Now they might be the AIM High standards, that's what they're calling it, or New York State standards. No mention of Common Core. Will that get the parents back? The bottom line is, what will get them back is you have to separate teacher evaluation from these assessments. You have to go back to the way they were, where, if you see my last bullet, Common Core assessments were controversial not just because of their content, but because of their purpose and how the data was used to evaluate teachers, not kids. The former assessments were designed to test what students know and show gaps in the learning. That's the difference. Perhaps they'll have to finally realize APPR doesn't work right, especially tying kids' test grades to teachers' evaluations. That will be the only thing to do with it. And that's all I have to say about that. Now, be interesting to watch. And you'll see further participation rates as I go through the rest. Now we're going to have a commercial because Ken, by the way, our Director of Technology, Ken Jacques, is not only filming tonight, but he has a lot of PowerPoints he has to set up for us to get through our program. And again, I'd like to thank my administrators for being here and to back me up for the next report I have on our assessments, our Regents and AP results. And I especially want to thank Dr. Timo over here who put all these numbers together and understands it's just about better than anybody. And made this presentation possible. Thank you, Doctor. That was fast, man. He's back at the cam already. Okay, here we are in the district. Looks good, right? Elementary school in good standing, middle school in good standing, high school in good standing, and a reward school. We love to hear that every year. However, there's a waiver, folks, on the participation rate that I just mentioned. We don't have, as you'll see, 95% kids taking the test in the elementary and middle school. We don't have that. So what could happen when they make these scores count in 2 years is could be designated differently than good standing. All right, this is what is referred to participation rate. Here we are, 3 through 8. If you look at the total on the bottom line, Common Core just came out in 2012. First year of opting out. We still did okay in ELA. You see that? Just dipped below 5th grade, 94. Stayed pretty strong in 95, right? Math, average of 92. We started falling behind the required participation rate back then, in 2013. Then watch us fall off the charts. If you look from 2013 to 16, math, 92% out of 38 taking the test. In ELA, as I said before, 95.5 down to 42. Now here's something I want to point out since it's interesting to me when we look at this chart. Look at 3rd grade. It went up. So I'm wondering why we went up in the participation rate taking the test. Is it because these kids only knew Common Core? It wasn't scary for them. That's all they knew when they came in. It made sense. Rather than a 5th grader saying, this year you're taking Common Core tests. You're doing Common Core things all of a sudden. That's why the rollout was so big. Okay? So more kids participated. And as you're going to see, there's a correlation between our participation rate and how successful we were in the 3rd grade. Because more kids took it. So that's where we are. My fear next year, and more anger, still there, more mistrust. Where is our bottom number going to be? Unless something changes and they separate APPR from our tests. Now, of course, when we talk about level 3 and 4, you know that's what the state calls proficient and excels. Below level 2, 1 is well below. Let's look at it. Remember I said the third grade, greater participation? Look at the third grade, how it jumped. However, remember, I can't make a comparison between last year and this year, the different tests. So I can only show them to you. I'm not comparing. But I still believe at that rate, in third grade, we have the highest amount of kids taking the test. And we're getting better results. That's not great. But if you get more kids back, I predict our success will be greater. How do you get them back? And in third grade, and look at fourth grade jump too, more kids took the test. They only really knew Common Core. No big surprise. Oops. I'm going backwards, sorry folks. Math. Third grade, remember more participation? 61% success. They got 3 or 4, 61% of our kids, more kids took it in third grade. That's all they had. That's my only, thinking about it, well, those parents weren't panicking as much about it. It wasn't new to them, they'd heard about it. But it is something interesting to look at. More kids took the test in third grade, we did better. But we can't compare those two. Quest Star, here's it. Okay, this year's data is embargoed, so I can't give the 216 results till next year, so I'm going to show you last year and the year before, in science. If my finger allows you to do that. Okay. Last year, in 2014, we do really well in science, folks. 96%, 96 at 3 and 4. This year we went up to 98. That's where we usually are. Believe it or not, those were dips on the right. Look at 8th grade. That was a little concern last year. These tests we can compare. 82, we jumped back up to 94. We're hoping this year's results for 2016 are better than that. But it was a nice job. Our Regents results. Okay, this is how we call things. Mastery is what you're going to hear me refer to. Mastery is when a kid gets an 85 to 100 on the Regents exam. All right? We can compare Regents exams. It's okay. So when we look at this, some of you are going to see a little glitch. Some of them are going to jump up. And I'll show you significant exams. Living environment compared to last year, a little bit down. But what happens is, as you look through these things, and I've seen the last 3 years, there might be 1 year that's a little bit off. We bounce back the next year, and I'll show you a few of those. Earth science, we were good summer last year. If you look over here on the right, 89-45, because that's not us. But this year, typical style, we had 94% passing and 59% mastery. So we jumped up to mastery, and we jumped up in passing. Chemistry, a difficult exam. We went up this year. Physics, a concern like earth science was last year. If you look at the 2 years, we have a concern there. We've been talking about it to the building administrator and Andy Matthews, our STEM director, to figure out what is this. And I'm going to show you an interesting when we compare the 3 villages on this physics exam. What do I expect when we're looking at all this? We expect that next year we're going to come back in the 90s. Seems the trend in how we perform that way. Integrated algebra, you should know, is being phased out. And this is interesting. As they don't use Common Core anymore, we all got trained and ready for our Common Core Regents exams, which we're kind of fearful coming. They're supposed to be very hard. What's going to happen to them in the future? Or will the Common Core part just disappear? But what's key about them, now you have Common Core algebra. See how we did last year, the first year out? 81% passing, 17% mastery. We jumped this year, second year in the game, to 94 and 31. One of the most difficult regions you can take out there, and I know because some of my neighboring superintendents, friends of mine, didn't want to share their Algebra 2 trig results with us, because we did well last year. We did well again this year. And that was well last year on that new exam, 84 and 30. Now at 92 and 45. The first year out of the box on Common Core Algebra 2, we never took it last year. Our kids didn't see it. Teachers didn't see it. We got 75% passing in 4. Next year, you're going to see that at least in the 80s, I might predict middle to high 80s, increase every year, the more they see it. Unless they say, no more Common Core Regents, we're going to change those. And then Common Core Geometry, the same thing, you'll see it increase there. Now those exams are tough, folks, and a lot of them you haven't seen too long. So teachers have to learn to prepare the kids better. Kids have to get used to it. You give me a thing with a hair trigger, Ken. Okay, U.S. history, slip a hair, 100 to 98, but increase to mastery. I'll take it. Global history, 95, 65, 96, 67, very close. But this last piece, to me, is very impressive. Look on the right, last year in 2015. That's the former English Regents we always had, right? We never tested our kids on the Common Core Regents. The first year we took it was this year, and if you look at the results, 98% passing, 79 mastery, over an 85, we beat last year's results on the regular Regents. To me, that's incredible. Now, unfortunately, usually this time of the year, we have neighboring districts reporting their Regents results out, and we refer to Port Jeff, refer to Miller Place, Shoreham, Wading River, Sayville, a lot of these places. But a number of these have not reported to the community, so we can't put them up here. The only one who has really is Three Village. So I'm comparing us to Three Village right now. And if you look, in some spots, they're better than we are. Some spots we're better than they are. I just mentioned our success on the English Regents. You can see how we were higher than Three Village. And I know Cheryl Pedicic, the superintendent, is a very nice lady. This is not like I'm trying to beat her with someone, in a race. But the interesting, remember we saw the glitch in physics that went down a little bit? More than a little bit. Look at the physics, below 90. We were 83, if you recall, the physics Regents. Three Village was down a bit, they're below 90 as well. So I feel a little bit better there as we struggle with what happened there, but it may have been a tougher test. Okay? May have been. But the last three are even, close. I don't see anybody blowing the other person away, except Ashton Trigg. I specified how well we did on that Regents. And usually I would compare that to all the other districts when they finally reveal. I'm thinking next year, we might make this presentation in November, so I will have more districts to show you. Hopefully they'll present to the communities by then. We'll have it. Okay, remember I told you the college board actually called me on Friday and asked how do you do that? This is pretty simple. We encourage kids. We don't have strict guidelines for AP. I can think of my former districts, and there were requirements for you to get into an AP class. We encourage kids to take AP classes and to sit for the test, even if you don't do great. One result we feel is a correlation is if you're a good academic student, you're strong, you reach, you take the AP class, you knock the Regents dead. And those kids help us get those results you just saw. But look over the years, and Mr. Dyroff just referred to that before, how it's grown for those kids who sit for AP. They're in a rigorous class. If they don't get the 3, 4, or 5, they might do better on the Regents, but they're also exposed to the rigor of college in this AP class. Okay, this again changes year to year, up and down, depends on your number. When I mean the N is the number, if I say an N, you'll see where we did last year, this year. Looked at a little bit English language, literature comp. but we went up in the English language comp. U.S. history is about the same. We jumped in world history. We went down a little bit. Politics, government, music theory, had 5 kids take it. Studio art, 2. Drawing, studio art, drawing, just a few. Okay, you go to the science scores. Again, areas of concern. Whenever we look at this analysis, we meet, buildings administrators meet and look at, like in the physics analysis, like we'll have to look at what went down here. Chemistry went down, so did environmental science. Okay? But it's not like say, okay, oh well, it happened, we're looking at why, and we'll discuss it with the teachers. But it points out what we're going to focus on. Now, next year, that could jump right back up again. The part that you have to look at that impresses you are the next 3, when you look at Calculus AB. If you're an administrator, you don't want to observe that class, because that's going to give you the biggest headache you've ever had in your life, trying to follow it and understand it. Calculus BC. I mean, I'll say that's for an English teacher. If you're a math person, you probably don't get it. 100% of the kids scored 3 to 5 in Calculus BC. If you know Mr. Kulik, I mean, you love him as much as I do at the high school. He's an incredible guy. Statistics, although it's 10, 100% passed. So you look at the results, and then, okay, we're a little weak in physics, but then you look at the physics 2 AP class, 14 all got 3 to 5. Okay, and that's the way it goes. But again, indicators, we focus on it and see how it works out. One of the things that attracted me to apply to this district were these numbers right here. Our graduation rate. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind, it is around 200 every year. We might be slipping a little bit lower. So any 1 or 2 who doesn't get out in the 4 years, it might be on the 5-year plan, which, by the way, years ago the state predicted not all students will make it out in 4 years. You know, someone need 5 to do it. If you have 1 or 2 who don't graduate the class, you're not going to have 100%. We get affected by that. A small number not making it on time. But 90% is something very proud of. And if you look at, these are also mind-blowing numbers. Readers with advanced designation, 39%. Readers with advanced designation, 35, 22. And real local diplomas. In the old days, they had certificate of attendance or an other diplomas that the state has done away with. You have to have a diploma to meet the requirements. Very proud of those numbers. Like the picture very much on this page. But our kids going to college, 96%, 4 and 2-year schools, employment, 1% military, 1% other means our kids, special needs who age out. They go to different programs, technical programs, skill programs that help them succeed in life after they leave. Okay, that's AP regions, and Ken has a quick run-up because we have an AIMSweb presentation, which Bob Sweeney was interested in hearing, and you may too, because when we can't rely on measurement from student growth due to the small number of takes in assessments 3 through 8, what can we rely on? How do we prove student growth? AIMSweb is that, and Dee will do a much better job explaining that to you than I can. But we use it in our middle school and our elementary school to show growth in our students. Dee?
Can everybody hear me if I don't use a mic? No. We brought AIMSweb in probably around 4 to 5 years ago, and we had originally trained everyone to how to read the reports, but really to administer it. We were using it for our AIS and special education students. At this point in time, though, given the fact that it's very difficult for us to look at our students as a group for each grade level, K through 8, given the state exams, we decided to go ahead and do what are called benchmarks. So basically, AIMSweb, it's a very vast computerized system, but the tests are given pencil paper still. They take about 1 to 10 minutes to administer depending upon the test. So I'll go through some of them, and I wrote some of the probes so that you can see actually what the students get and how it's scored. But it's a 3-tier progress monitoring system that goes hand in hand with what's called response to intervention. So if a child's struggling in a classroom, you have 3 tiers that you can work through prior to referring them into special education. Some of our special education students are actually in tier 3 types of interventions in the classrooms. It's based on frequent continuous student assessment. It's also indexed. You can look at how that student compares to their own progress in the 3 benchmarks that we're doing this year. You can look at how they compare in their own classroom to the other students. You can look at how that classroom compares to other classrooms in the same building at the same grade level. You can look at, if we had 3 elementary schools, you can look at how the 3rd grade in building A compares to building B, compares to building C, which we can't do here because we only have one building for each grade level. We can, however, compare ourselves to other local districts and to New York State levels and a national percentile. So it really allows for a lot of in-depth kind of looking at how our students are indexed and doing according to other measures. Information can be shared among the teachers, so if the student took this in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, their 4th grade teacher can now see all of those results on one graph that shows that student's progress from year to year. And it will show, depending on how frequently the students were benchmarked. I think, John, for the first couple of years, we were just doing 2 benchmarks, fall and spring. The middle school, I think, was doing 3 benchmarks for a little while. This year, and actually we started it last year, everybody, all the classrooms are being benchmarked 3 times per year. So that's the standard procedure with AIMSweb. You benchmark in the fall at the beginning of the school year to see where they're falling. You benchmark in the winter, usually around December. Then you benchmark again in the spring. Actually, it's nice to have that winter benchmark in there because then you can better predict who might need some specialized instruction before going into the state test so that they can actually improve their performance in their reading levels. We're basically using AIMSweb for ELA and for math, major reading comprehension, oral reading skills, all math skills. There is a spelling and a writing section. The writing section is really very akin to what we do with our students with the Columbia Writing Program, where they're given a prompt through AIMSweb and then they're asked to write. They're given 3 minutes to write a short story based on the prompt that you give them. That's pretty much what we're doing with Columbia, so we're not benchmarking them on that in AIMSweb. For the other issues that we're dealing with in terms of math, you can also index this so when you get the student's math score, if it's math computation, it goes hand in hand with certain math programs that you can actually use to address the student's weaknesses. Like I said, there are 3 tiers for benchmarking. I think most of our teachers have also used some of the reports in report card time. They'll bring it in so that you can see how your students do. The 3 tiers. Tier 1 is for benchmarking. It's universal screening. Like I said, all students will be universally screened. It identifies any student at risk very early on. I'm going to show you some of the reports so that you can see if you're sitting at a parent-teacher conference and you have access to that report, you can actually see how you can tell whether your student is at risk or not. Tier 2 is strategic monitoring or monthly monitoring. If a student is referred into the IST, the team meetings that occur in general education, where if a student is struggling with reading and the teacher wants to brainstorm with other teachers about maybe some reading strategies that they can use to improve it, what you can do is actually benchmark that student, employ one strategy in the classroom, actually do a benchmark before you begin that program. You can do it every month to see if that program is actually addressing that student's needs. If not, after 2 months or so, you can switch to a different program and see if that program is better in addressing their needs. Progress monitoring is for Tier 3. It's a much more intensive monitoring. It's really for those highly at-risk students who are probably going to require more individualized instruction in the classroom, small group instruction, that kind of issue, as well as some kind of program, intensive program to address their needs. Progress monitoring is usually done weekly, so it's very intensive. It's a curriculum-based measurement. That does not mean, it is indexed to the Common Core if that's how you choose to pull it up. This is not made to address Common Core issues. This is generalized indices as to how a child's doing with reading or with math. So it's a continuous assessment of basic skills geared toward that grade level. And like I said, it's web-based, so the information can be shared with parents, among the teachers. If a child is in AIS, the AIS teacher would need to see how that student is doing, would need to see the strategies that have been employed in the classroom to help that student, and use those same strategies when that student goes to AIS services. It's a reliable, valid measure of student performance and student achievement. It is research-based. Like I said, there are a lot of norms. As we go through the different areas of the test, I can tell you exactly how they're indexed as well. It's simple, efficient, and like I said, a short duration to administer. Each test takes about 1 to 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes really are mostly if the test involves a lot of instructions before you begin the test. Most of the time it's about 3 to 5 minutes for the upper grade levels. It assists teachers in planning the instruction, how to differentiate the instruction for different groups of students within their classroom. And again, I'll show you this rainbow graph that kind of allows you to see how you can group your students in a classroom. It's sensitive to student improvement over time, so you don't need to let a lot of time lapse. With many standardized assessments, being a psychologist, if I administer one assessment, it's really 2 to 3 years before I can use that assessment validly again to assess a student. Well, in a classroom, you don't want to let 2 or 3 years go by. You want to assess it as quickly as possible. So like I said, you can assess it within a week, a month, or 3 times during the school year. Okay, what is assessed? The test of early literacy. We separated them K to 1. The assessments are all done individually, and K to 1 is the 4 tests that make up the test of early literacy, and then 4 tests for early numeracy. And early literacy, I wrote some of the samples here if anybody wants to take a look at them. This is letter naming fluency. The teacher has this in front of them. The student gets a copy that doesn't have the numbers on them. They can go across the page. They are asked to simply name the letter. What letter is it? They're upper and lowercase letters. So in kindergarten, first grade, they would need to know both upper and lowercase. The teacher then records how many letters are read within a 1-minute time frame. For letter sound fluency, again, the student's presented with a list of letters. They're asked to make the sound that corresponds to the letter. Again, a very, very simple, short assessment. Phonemic segmentation. The student is not given anything to look at, but the teacher will read a word such as sort, and the student needs to phonemically segment that to s-o-t, so that they can pronounce the word. Again, that's a 1-minute test. The nonsense word fluency I like the best because the kids start laughing when you're administering it. It's words like zoke, bim, kind of nonsense syllables that are put together, but can they actually sound out each letter to make the word, it's a complete word. Then you have the tests of early numeracy. Again, oral counting is just simply ask the child to count from 1 to 100. You see where they get in 1 minute. Are they able to complete that in a minute? Number identification is giving them a list of numbers in a row and asking them to name them as quickly as they can. Discrimination, the quantity discrimination is you give them an array of 2 numbers and you say which one is bigger, which one is the bigger number. Missing number, it actually, the form has 3 numbers, the 2 numbers with 1 underlined section, and they're asked to fill in the missing number. So this, it would be 5, 6, and the child would need to fill in the 7. They can say it. If they can't write the 7, the teacher can record the 7, but all done within 1 minute. Okay, the oral reading K through 8 is They read aloud for 1 minute in a passage that's given to them, and like I said, this is not according to Common Core, it's not a Common Core passage. It's from what's called Affirmation Standard Reading Assessment Packages, and you record the number of words read correctly versus the errors. And it's, again, a simple 1 minute test. The maze is for comprehension. It's a closed reading test. They're given 3 minutes. They're given the first sentence that goes across the top of the page for each grade level is a complete sentence. After that, every 7th word, they're given a choice of 3 words that they have to fill in the blank and circle the word that would correspond to make that sentence correct in a full reading passage. So that's a little trickier, and it involves, needing to know what the passage is about in order to continue making the correct responses. The math comprehension is 2 minutes long for each grade level. All grade level probes are equal probes. There are a lot of different versions to each of these tests within the system, the web-based system. So you have to choose what's appropriate or what you're looking to assess with the child. So for math computation, you want to look at addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division basically, and you can pull up probes that will look simply at addition or simply at division, or they can mix it all up. They can do, for first grade, there are very simple addition and subtraction problems that are mixed. For the upper grade levels, you might want to test multiplication and division mix. Do they know, to look for the right signs, things like that. The Math Concepts and Application is based on the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics Assessments. So again, it's not Common Core based, but it's based by math teachers. Like I said, the writing and spelling we're assessing in other ways. We have weekly spelling tests in the elementary and the middle school for many of the grade levels, so it's taken care of already, and the teacher usually has a running record of how the students are doing in the area. How is it administered? Like I said, very quickly. Scores are recorded after the students do the pencil paper portions of it, or the teachers have reported their responses. They then go into the system, they enter it automatically, and it computes all the children's scores for each of the different areas that have been assessed. You can get an individual student record, like I said, a classroom record. So let's go on to, this is a typical benchmark report. I took this straight out of one of the Ames Web training videos, only because I didn't want to use confidential information. This is a fictitious, made-up student and school. But I hope you can see that blue dot that's in the center of each of those green squares. That's the student and where the student fell. Those green squares, it's called the bars and whiskers report, because the bar up on top represents a student who will be performing above the average range. The green box is all the average range, with the center, some of it's not in the center, but that black line that goes through it represents the absolute average of that group of students. That red bar at the bottom would represent, if the student's dot was on one of those red bars, it would represent a student that you might need to take a look at because they're falling below average. Okay, so it looks like this student made progress throughout the school year and ended up in the higher average range toward the end of the school year. On most of our students, like I said, if they've been assessed in the past, you'll be able to see how they did, if this was a 3rd grade student, how they did in 1st grade for maybe those 2 benchmarks that we did. Then it would show 2nd grade, and then this would be their 3rd grade. This is a strategic monitoring. This was probably a student that was referred in for some kind of AIS services. You can actually take a look at how they did by looking monthly at different interventions that were done, taking a measurement, and the student has peaks and valleys. So some of the strategies that they were using were successful, then they maybe plateaued on that and they needed to use another strategy. So it's a good way of measuring how you're addressing the student's differentiated instruction in the classroom. These are all the different types of tests. This is what the window looks like when you go in. You can pretty much pull up anything that you need. This is actually one of our, and I blocked out all the children's names, ID numbers, and the teachers. This is one of our 3rd grade classes from last year. This is just on the reading, the curriculum-based measurement. So this was oral reading scores. It's only one area, but you can see in the bands of color, the upper one, the white bar that has no color, is well above average. That's a student that you might want to differentiate instruction for going upward. Likewise with the purple level, those are students that are well above average, so you're going to want to probably challenge them a little bit more. The green is within the average range. Those students that are in that yellow, you might want to begin to consider maybe putting them in a small group instruction, maybe changing their placement in the classroom so that they're closer to the teacher or the board when the teacher is teaching. See how that affects their score on the next benchmark. The students that are in that red band, those are the ones that if they're not already referred for special education, for AIS services, which are not part of special ed, they're part of general ed, if those students are not referred into one of those to get some intensive instruction, then you won't make that move right away. The other thing that I like about this, the Lexile measures that are on the far right are really helpful to parents as well as the teachers. A lot of times we get questions, well, my student, my child's a good reader, but how do I know what types of books for them to read? Those Lexile measurements, a Lexile is actually a way of indexing how your child is reading and at what level they read well and at what level they comprehend well. So that's reading and comprehension together. So for example, some of the students on the bottom level, the 200 to the 260 level would probably read something like The Cat in the Hat very, very easily and be able to understand it. Something at a 500 level would probably be one of the Junie B. Jones or something like that at a third grade level. When you're looking at a 760, that's a pretty high level. That student would probably be reading something that's more of a 6th grade, 7th grade level than 3rd grade. You also have to look at the grade level. You can't just go according to the Lexile. Lexiles go anywhere from below 200 to about a 1700, 1800. A 1700 would be a very advanced graduate level college textbook. I think the Odyssey is probably at about a 110. 1350, I think, is probably something like Cervantes' Don Quixote, just to give you kind of an index. So it's very helpful. And within AIMSWeb, if the teacher can go in and actually plug in the student's Lexile, and you can choose an area that the student might be interested in. If they're interested in reptiles, if they're interested in plants, if they're interested in reading novels, you can actually click on it, and it will bring up thousands of books as suggestions for that student. So it not only tells you where the student's functioning in your classroom, functioning within the district. National norms are also available to compare, but that Lexile is very nice because it allows a parent to really get a listing of books that might be helpful for their child and where their child won't struggle. But on the other side, if you've got a child who's at a 730 Lexile, you might want to challenge them with an 800 Lexile book, and it will give you a range of books to choose from. So it gives a lot of information, not just for the teacher, but for the parent as well.
Dean, a question, Dean?
Just one, thank you for the report. It actually explains a lot to me on what is assessed. When you talk about, let's say, the maze or reading, the CDM program, K through 8. Let's say for an 8th grader, for instance, how are we comfortable with, hey, this is what you test them on, because this is what they should know at this grade, as opposed to all the problems you have with the Common Core, that's not a good test. And what I thought was kind of weird was that on the bottom it said this was Pearson. So I know that's like the devil word, right?
It was the devil word. You can index it to the Common Core. There is a way of getting into this program. This program is a very rich program. It will allow you, it also allows us for our 5th and 6th grade students who are doing reading streets. If you have a child who's struggling, you can actually click on that and get goals from reading streets, because that's built into this program. So while it's the devil that it's Pearson, there are other things that we use in the district that are out by Pearson that are not necessarily Common Core that are embedded in this program, which is really nice for a teacher who might have students struggling. These are basic skills, though, and like I said, they didn't use the Common Core, they used those the national math teachers. I like it because it comes from teachers, and it's really teachers telling you what students need to know at basic levels. And yes, there are different gradations of these are called probes, when you actually assess a student, and you need to pull them up according to what is grade appropriate, and it will give you, for example, like this is a third grade first passage probe. It's much different than, you know, a kindergarten probe, which might have huge text on it and very little text.
Gotcha. But that probe would be something similar to a kid in Chicago, they have the same thing from a third grade.
They're all the same thing. They have different versions of the probes in there so that when you test, you're not testing with the same one. It won't let you choose the same one for the same child over and over again. But what's nice is they've looked at them in terms of the Lexile, in terms of the difficulty. Even the math problems, if you go into AIMSweb, these math problems, I think these are first grade math problems. While this is one probe, so you would give this to one child, another child could have the same one, could have a different one. This child may need 10 of these during the school year. What they say is they're all even placed on the page in a comparable progression, so that you are able to see if the child progressed or not.
Thank you.
The initial benchmarks, though, they're all the same probe, correct?
They can be. They can be.
The fall, winter, and the spring, they should all be the same to the students.
For all the students that are taking, that's the universal. But for students who are
Progress
getting,
monitoring, then they
Right.
get different.
right, the more frequent probes are going to be different.
So, all of these tests, the AIMS tests that you're using, they're basically telling you whether a child is on grade level or average or below average. But it's been my experience that we have a lot of above average kids who might, when they take these tests because of some sort of learning difference, they might test average. But their potential, but they don't test below average, so they're not getting services. But they sit in the classroom as an average child when they're really could use services to meet their own potential, not to meet an average.
But this is called
So-
one measurement. You would never, even in special ed, you never
So what
look
are
at
we
one
using?
measure. You never just look at one measure in isolation. And what we would do for a child like that, if they've taken the state assessments, you take a look at that. If they've taken different things in the classroom, you want to look at their report card throughout the years. You look at a bunch of different indicators. You don't just look at one test or one indicator to make a determination.
I totally agree, but I think what we see a lot in the district is you have kids with a slight learning difference who test average, and they're testing average on the state test, and they're testing average now on the AIMS test. But and they're not identified, but their potential is much higher.
Mrs. May, the opportunity that we've used AIMSweb is it's a short test. It's a diagnostic tool that, unlike standardized tests of the old day or hours and a big commitment, the teacher can use this as part of his or her toolbox, which can be complemented by you give the test and they come out as average. But in the classroom, when you're asking them to read or they're participating in an activity, you'll start to see, let's say that the student does above average in the classroom activity. That's really what we're supposed to be doing, is teaching all of this. It now gives the teacher an opportunity to say, how come on that test you scored only average? What was different? And it does start to address the student who may jam up a little bit in the test, but excels outside of that test. And it reminds us that the teacher is the assessment, not the test.
I understand that, and don't get me wrong, I think the AIMS this is a great tool. I'm not disagreeing with the tool at all. I just see it that it's similar to all the other tools that you're also using. When I've seen in other districts where they look at other measures to see if a child is meeting their own potential, not meeting an average of a grade expectation.
But I don't think we're looking for a student to be average. We're looking for the student to excel.
But
So we're going to use that information to make sure that that student has all the strategies available they need to do as well as they possibly can. I don't think we're looking to bring average here.
right. Well, that's what I'm
I'm
looking
not.
for. Of course, and I don't think that anybody in this district is, but I just want to see strategies. I mean, this is a very extensive strategy to use in all of our kids, and I think it's a great tool. Please don't misinterpret that. I just see that we don't have a strategy in place to look for those kids that are average. They're testing average, but they're not average. I think we have a lot of those. So that's,
You know, I would hope too that teachers get to know their kids and they know each student, and in their conversations with those kids, and in their writing, that's going to start coming out about it. And then you were just talking, and forgive me, I'm not doing my own ego thing here. I'm just going to use my son as an example. And I hope he grows up to be attentive. My son is. He's such a gentleman. But he's probably going to do average because that's okay with him. You know, and there's some kids who want to be like the rest of the kids and not stand out. But when I take him to Jungle Bob's, a reptile store in Center Ridge, he can hold a conversation at 6 years old for 40 minutes with Jungle Bob. What Jungle Bob's making reference that, what do you want to do in college? He's telling him, they're discussing at 6 the difference between reptiles and amphibians. So you're a parent, you think that way. He's got some above average skills. But when he brings home papers, and sometimes I say, he goes, well, that's okay. I said, no. And you try to teach that. But I'm hoping his teacher, and they have structures in place, to find out every kid has areas of strengths and weaknesses. Every kid. So that hopefully that teacher will know that kid well enough to find out how do you feed that strength, identify it, and feed it and let it grow. A good teacher will know that, those strengths, and where the potential to excel. Sometimes they need a kickstart. So that's the responsibility. A lot of what you're talking about is the teacher who can recognize that greatness. And they might test, especially, you never know, a lot grow at a later stage and can test average, right? Well, that goes. So.
I actually think that a lot of the kids that are on the upper level are going to excel on this because most of those students who struggle because of the time constraints sometimes given. These are not long tests. These are very quick, easily administered, doesn't take a lot of their time, they don't fatigue. I actually think they're going to score, if they are potentially the higher end kids, they're going to score better than they will on a state test.
Kind of in relation to Mrs. May, I have a question just about the actual information that teachers can get out of the testing. Is it just giving them an overall score in each area, or is it breaking it down into skills? So when they're doing the words that they write correctly, is it breaking it down into which cueing systems are they using so the teachers can focus on what strategies they need to focus on?
It does give suggestions for strategies.
The RCBM, they're just reading a passage and the teacher's clicking every time they miscue. And you're not getting what kind, they're not analyzing.
Because I'm wondering,
You're not getting a
if you're just
miscue
getting a
analysis.
number grade, like it would be great if they're reading comprehension. I'm not familiar with this, so it's like asking, what kind of information can they learn from their students
You
that can
can
help
look
drive
at the
their
students'
instruction.
responses individualized, not in the web-based program, but you can look at what words that student got incorrectly. You can record how they actually said the word incorrectly, so you will get the idea of
Yeah, but you're
what-
listening to them read it for a minute. So
Right.
you're clicking and listening, you're not recording what they're saying.
Like what kind of miscue
You're
are they
thinking
making?
of more like a running record, you can do that. This is not like that. This is just, if they omit a word, it's fine. So that's different. So if they miscue, you just click it. If they say it wrong, you click it. If they substitute it, you click it. And then that's it. I mean, I don't think you have time to really write down what they're miscuing and analyze it. It's not that type of program. It's really, our CBM is straight fluency.
It also depends on the grade level.
Yeah, well,
K
in the
and
upper grade
1,
levels.
they are
In the upper grade
administered,
levels.
individualized, and they're not clicking while the kids are reading it.
Well, I'm speaking only on the upper grade levels for straight
Correct.
fluency.
It's much different on the upper grade level. But for the younger students, it's one-on-one, you're sitting with them, I've been, and actually we are administering
So what grade do they
some
go
of
to, do they go to a computer?
some of the, no, the kids
It's
don't
all
do it on
on
the computer at all. It's either done in a group in the classroom, or the reading passages are done individually outside by either the AIS teachers or the teachers of the classroom.
And the maze is just basically they read the paragraph and fill in the, this is for the upper
They
grade.
circle the
They
word
circle,
that
they circle the
replaces.
correct word, they have 3 choices. So is that grade comprehension? I don't think so.
Right, because,
No,
you're
but
finding
again,
out, you know,
it's only
certain
one measurement of
storyline.
comprehension.
I agree
You're
with that
also
too, but-
You're also using your information from Journeys. You're
10
using your
question
information
quizzes.
from
10 question
Reading
quizzes they use
Streets.
a lot.
So,
They don't do running records. They don't, there's a lot of things that are not being done.
I'll use my own daughter as an example. I just had a tutor evaluate her and was told that she is behind in comprehension, she is behind in certain skills that at the grade she's at, she should have. I'm paying someone privately because of this. She evidently is doing fine on all these tests because I haven't been contacted with her need of any services.
I think they're only finishing the assessments, right, John?
And she does,
The full benchmarks? Yeah.
her report cards are beautiful, but let's face it, reading comprehension, as you get older, is a necessity. She gets 4s and high 3s on everything. So on paper, she looks beautiful. But when I'm told, and I have been saying it for years, there's an issue, it's upsetting that, you know, why isn't it being caught? Why am I look like the crazy mom pointing out something when I was just proven that she does have the issues in the areas that I have claimed she has issues in. So, you know, I don't really see a whole lot of benefit in it.
Have you brought that to the teacher's attention now?
They have been very supportive and we are figuring out what to do. But as of right now, she doesn't qualify because on paper she looks good. So, you know, it's very difficult. It's frustrating as a mom to be able, you know, to say year after year, I see there's a disconnect here. Being told every year that her vocabulary and she stands out, but, you know, I'm surprised at her reading. I'm not surprised because I've said it. But if you look at this, she's considered okay. So, you know, the teacher this year has been great so far. She's listened to my concerns, so hopefully, you know.
And the teacher can take a look. She can employ some additional strategies in the classroom if she's aware of the issues, and then she can maybe do the more frequent, you know,
Yeah.
monitoring. Make sure that they're all working.
Okay, I have my administrators here. Any further questions? There's a lot of information you got tonight, so it'll be posted on the website. And we do have, I'll stop right here.
In regards to the Regents exams, and you're talking about the disconnect with the exams, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but from what I heard, there is a huge curve, like on the math exam. So,
On the math regents?
on the math Regents, I heard there's a huge curve. So when you throw those numbers up that 90-something% of the kids passed, do they actually have raw figures? If a kid got a 75, how much material he actually learned? Or, because when I used to take a test when I was younger, if you got a 75, it means that you understood 75% of the material.
The
Now,
scale
from
that
what I
they use,
understand,
it's a scaled score. It's not a 0 to 100.
no, I'm talking about just the Regents exams.
Right, I am too. I am too. I did the data. I am too. And I do the Regents exam. That 0 to 100 is not a percentage. That's a standard score. So yes, we do get, for each Regents exam, we do get graphs and grids as to how many questions need to be correct in order for a student to receive a 65 or a 70 or a
Well,
72.
well, that's what I'm saying. So you're saying he got a 70 and he passed, but he might have only completed 20% of the material. So how is that teaching a child the subject if they're only learning 20%, but we're saying that's okay, you passed?
And each year that percentage could change because the state changes it every year.
Well, I understand that, but do
They
the
norm the data-
teachers, when they look at their students' grades, to me, if a kid got a 70, but that really means he only knew 20% of the material, we failed that kid somewhere. But he won't get those services because he passed that test. But yet he only mastered 20% of the material for the year, but because of the curve, he has 70-something on the test. And therefore, it's okay.
In math this year, I don't know that it was that low, isn't it still here?
The algebra curve is pretty substantial, but as you go up in the geometry's less and algebra's not much curve at all.
Right.
But
A lot
Algebra
did-
1, I heard kids that were getting like an 18 or a 20 were passing the test.
In years past, and I would say about 5 years ago, you could get, about 5 years ago on the regular integrated algebra regions, you could get 17 questions correct out of about, 82, I think, and pass with a 65. That's no longer the case. That's not the case anymore. And especially with the Common Core, because now we can't even, we can only give the integrated algebra regions exam to those students who started that curriculum before a certain date. So we've essentially phased it out. We had one student who was eligible to take
No, I'm talking about the recent
the
algebra,
Common Core
algebra.
algebra was not scaled that drastically downward.
Do you know what the scale was?
Um,
What the minimum percentage of
Off
the...
the top of my head,
You
You can find that out.
So if you got a 42 out of an 85, you consider to be good enough to...
it was about 50% so that you could pass. To
So
get
basically, he only has to
65.
learn half the material. He or she only has to learn half the material. He's considered competent in it, and we're okay with that.
No,
I'm not
that-
saying, it's obviously, the school doesn't make the standards,
That's
the
why we
teachers
were-
don't make the standards, I understand that. But is there a way to, I'm not concerned about the state and stuff. I understand they have to have their regulation and tests and stuff like that. But our job as a community and the teachers is to teach the kids, not just for them to pass a test.
Correct. That's
So-
why we look at the mastery level as well, because that level is much higher. So you want to look at, are we increasing our mastery rate as well as our passing rate? Because then a student really does need to achieve, when they get the 85 to 100, essentially they're getting a great portion of the material correct. So you want to look at the mastery rates and the passing rate, which is why we report both. You
So
wanna
what are
make
we
sure-
doing for the kids that are just barely passing? Because they're not, I believe that's what, they're not to their potential at that point. I guess that's what Ms. May was saying too, in the sense of the thing, the ones that are scoring average. Even though to me they're below average if it's a 50, but they're reported as average. So what are we doing for them to at least get them to an actual level of, a legitimate level of average? Because a 50 is not an average grade, that's,
Well,
You could-
a
especially
50
multiple
would not
choice, you
get
can
them
almost-
past, if they get a 50, they're not passing the test, they have to get a 65. Are you talking about 50% of the material?
That's all the number I care. I care about the kid retaining the material, not what the state thinks the kid should get to pass. I'm worried about education in the classroom, not education based on politics and, teachers getting assessed and stuff like that on the test. Because it used to teach the kids to learn. Now the teachers are handcuffed where they have to teach to these exams, based on their performance, based on money to the school, with the federal and stuff. Do you not understand what I'm saying?
Well, there's no money connected to Regents exams. We don't get money based on how well our children do on the Regents exam.
Gentlemen, anyone want to
Well, we look at
respond?
kids' performance in class too, and it's extra, we put the math lab classes.
There's 4 other grades they get into the years, that's just one test. They're getting graded the whole year, so that's just one day.
How much
one
is the
test,
Regents
3
worth
hours.
though? Isn't it worth 20% of their
20%
final,
of the final grade.
20% of their final grade, which could be a 50% of the material, and it's also a requirement for graduation. I just don't see how we're teaching the children.
Well, if I could just, we've spoken about this at times. The state decides whether right or wrong, hey, we wrote this test so many questions were extremely difficult, so we'll
Yes, I
count
understand.
that as many. So that's why there's a curve. I mean, you have a point, but you also have to look at what the state's doing. The state is saying, all right, we wrote this exam, and some of these are extremely hard, even for what we've taught, so we're not going to give them as much weight. So if a student doesn't get that, it's not as bad. So I understand what you're saying, but you also have to realize that the state puts this barometer in so that they can then say, hey, we threw out some hard questions also, whether it's right or wrong, to assess, hey, did all the kids get question 96 right? Because that was a tough question. But you know what? It was so tough, it shouldn't really count, so they lowered it. So I don't think it's to the extent what you're saying, although I understand what you're saying. Dee, I think you're answering correctly. We look at the mastery, and those are people who've gotten higher. And I don't think the kids who are passing it are necessarily, even if they just passed, oh, these are bad kids, they just couldn't understand it at all. You know, you just got to look at both in between the other levels.
I think also if you look at the subsequent exams, so algebra is the one exam that has a substantial curve. But those kids move on, even those kids who are just demonstrating 50% of mastery of the topics and skills, they're going to geometry, whether they're going into the lab class or not, and the geometry scores are increasing. And then they're going into the Algebra 2 class, and those scores are increasing as well. So while on the surface you might see a concern, the knowledge base that they have leaving algebra is serving them well as they go to geometry and Algebra 2.
And we provide the additional support so that they can do the every other day math labs, which are every math.
No, I guess that's what I'm asking. Do they provide the support for the kids that are getting in the 72, that are only understanding 50% of the material? That's what
Yeah,
I'm
those kids would now be enrolled in the geometry with the lab class, so they're going to get an extra period of math every other day.
Poorly, we don't know until they decide where they're going to put the marks. And the same with the Regents exams. What do they know they have to curve? And you're saying, okay, my kid gets a 70, but he's really, how much does he have when they have a curve like that? So the individual classroom teacher, and there are more grades than the Regents, they should have tests, frequent assessments. They should know, like I said, Mrs. May, you should know your kid's strengths and weaknesses and help that kid who's doing okay, but they're not strong in math, particularly, and they should be aware and offer that help. And I know as a fact, if they did, geometry is harder than algebra. So I know he's going to geometry next year and he got a 70. As Rob said, we're going to give him a lab with that class to help him out. So I know that that's taking place now. But you have good questions. How much do the Regents really indicate how much kids know? They set the bar. They have to take it for graduation. We have to administer those exams. And fortunately, a lot of our kids do really well. And we do think about those who aren't getting the mastery rates way up there, and the average student. I might have strengths in other areas of math and science, which was my weakness. What are you getting extra? And hopefully differentiation takes place. They know they're really advanced students who don't need a lot. They know the students who can get by. They know the students who need extra help. And our math department is one of the strongest in the building, fortunately. And I watch a lot of them offer extra help during their lunch periods, free periods. Kids are in there all the time. So hopefully that's happening, if a person's child needs that help in math. They make some good points. Thanks. Yes?
Are the Ainsworth reports sent home to parents automatically? Do you have to request them? And when do they usually come out if they do?
Parent-teacher conferences would be a good time to ask to see the first benchmark, and then you can probably also, the teacher could probably pull up how the student did the year before. If your child's not in kindergarten or first grade, you should be able to pull up an entire report of however many times they've been benchmarked.
So I'm not sure if that's if they automatically do that, or should we ask for it ahead of time?
I think some teachers do, some.
I think when you make your appointment for your parent-teacher conference, jot a note to the teacher to say, I'd like to discuss this as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I think also just piggybacking on the Regents exams, it's but one number, and yet it's a meaningful number for most of our students because they need those exams to graduate. However, what I see, and I'm in that building all the time, my office is in the math wing, I like it because I I see a lot of our teachers throughout the high school and the middle school, not just using tests during the classroom, but actually looking at more creative ways of assessing what a student knows. Projects, group work, things that they need to get together to do. Presentations in class that they're graded on. I think that's great for public speaking for the students, even if it's not a public speaking class. And I see a lot of that go on in our building. So we're talking about tests, but tests they're not the be-all and end-all. There are other ways of assessing students, and I'm seeing it go on in classrooms.
In addition, many students are wrestling with how much the Regents should count as part of the final grade. We're watching some neighboring Regents districts who are diminishing that grade, not 20%, maybe less. Rob and I talk about it all the time. We're going to see how they do. Will kids care enough about that Regents if it doesn't mean too much, when they go in there? Because right now we see those kids, those few who take our state assessments and they watch their friends going off and reading and not sitting for the exam, or they know it's not that important and they just sit there. We don't want to make it insignificant because we might have a higher failure rate, and you hit it. They need that ticket to graduate. How evil it is or how good it is, they have to have the 5 to get out. But we are constantly talking about how much the weight should be on our Regents exam.
Just
Other questions?
aside to your question about the Ames Web, it may be useful so that the teacher is prepared. One of the reasons I asked that we have this Ames Web presentation is that parents know about it. It's just a tool, it's one of the many. But send an email to the teacher. This way they're prepared ahead of time. And this way you can have a conversation so that 15 minutes or 20 minutes in your parent-teacher conference is a little bit more focused, or they can follow up.
That's why I asked about the check, see if it's an automatic or if you give it to the teacher.
I used to get a lot of questions from parents, is my child reading on grade level? It's just another it's an additional benchmark. You can see where they're falling. And also nationally, how they're doing.
Yes.
I understand the benefit of these benchmarks for an individual child. I have a child with some learning differences in the middle school now, and for him, certainly this is something that we refer back to a lot. My question is there somebody in the district who analyzes this information, and do we use it to identify gaps in the curriculum maybe, or for particular teachers, or something across the board, not just for an individual student?
We use everything to look at gaps in curriculum and what we're not addressing. Even with the state assessments, there's a lot of information that comes back where we can sit down with the teacher. You can look at a teacher-based, you can look at a grade-based, and you can look at an individual student. And you can actually see through the questions, and there are analyses that are done through something called BARS. It's a BOCES-based service that actually takes a look, and I can pull up classroom by classroom. So I can see if, this classroom performed lower than the other classrooms. What was different? What did the students not get? And you can actually look at question by question.
So I understand the program's capability to do that.
Right.
My question is there somebody in the district who is actually doing that analysis?
Yes. And it's me. We have a shared data expert from BOCES who's available to meet with teachers. It's the principals, assistant principals, directors. That's why the directors are here. When we get those results back, we're all sitting at the computers looking at what's going on and where the gaps might be.
Thank you.
I have a question. Are teachers being expected to use results from Ames or any other classroom assessments to differentiate within the classrooms, especially in the reading curriculum? In all grades?
That's what I'm hoping that they're using it to differentiate
middle school
instruction in
as
their classrooms.
Should.
That's why I said you also have to look at the upper range. You have to differentiate upward and you have to differentiate downward.
We were told on back to school night that there is no differentiation in reading in 5th grade.
In
5th grade.
Can you say this to Dr. Jones? Did the teacher say that?
5th grade.
Oh, 5th grade, I'm sorry, Pete.
So could you repeat your question?
I
I'm
happen to
sorry.
know in 5th grade there should be differentiation with reading
There's one thing
streaks
that
that
you
we brought in,
mentioned is that
but
the
also
Ames Web-
we're training many of our teachers, our AIS teachers, as well as our special ed teachers. We have a day carved out in November for them to also be trained in sidewalks, which is the Tier 3 training to address issues related to students who are on that lower level, that red band that I showed you.
One thing you mentioned as well is that it ties into the Jump Street, that's called
Reading Street.
Reading Street program, which is the program they're using in the classroom. So does it have materials to differentiate?
Yes, and it can also develop goals. You can actually go into that bank and look at goals that would go hand in hand with what's going on in Reading Street.
Because there's a lot of talk about AIS intervention, things like that, but I don't think that they differentiate between on average and above average in the classroom either.
Average and above. It sounds familiar. Okay, that's a discussion to have. Unfortunately, Mr. Pramateris, I believe in something, and I'll investigate that. My slogan forever as a teacher and department chair was, one menu does not fit everybody. Okay, forever. And fortunately, you can learn many ways to recognize, as I said to Ms. May, that above average student. Some indicators may say above, but when you have it above, you have to sometimes water that flower more to keep them above and let them
To
grow.
keep them above is really important.
So-
So they start to fall to average when you don't push them to be above average.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot of training in the writing program. Is there, do you have a literacy coordinator or anyone like that for ongoing reading training? No?
We don't have a literacy coordinator. It's
Do they
done through
receive-
it's done through the director, Mr.
Do they receive,
Labianco.
do the teachers receive, just, I know when journeys first came out, they were trained in that, but is there any ongoing training on just how to implement the program in reading groups and guided reading and lots of components of updated reading?
We have somebody coming in, Frank,
Yes.
we've got somebody else coming in to do something for the general teachers for reading
We
students, right?
get the election day, they're coming back for two staff development, one online with Reading Streets and then sidewalks, they're coming in for two sessions.
And the Reading Streets portion is for all the teachers. The sidewalks is really for the AIS and the special ed teachers.
That's in the middle school? What about the elementary?
Actually, we're doing sidewalks in elementary as well, even though they don't have reading streets down there. But in the elementary school, there are a number of trainings that we did for journeys. Do we have anybody coming in the rest of this year?
For journeys, no. I would say that this year, the majority of our PD initiative has been in our Red. But should teachers identify a conference, if there is a professional development opportunity that they would like to investigate, then obviously that's considered and putting in a program by learning plan.
We typically have a lot of teachers that go to the workshops that BOCES for our reading and literacy programs. And I think we have a whole group going for social studies as well right now.
Okay. Let's get back to our regular meeting. Administrators, thank you so much for coming.
I too wanted to thank our high school administrators, our AP scholars, their parents, and the high school staff on a whole for the amazing job they do to help our students reach this level of academic excellence that we all saw tonight among the 40 some odd students who received those honors. So kudos to all. At this moment, we're about to start our 15-minute question and answer period from the community. We ask that it has something to do with the agenda, and would you kindly recognize yourself or identify yourself as you're recognized. So, questions pertaining to the agenda. I guess everybody asked their questions before.
We asked
So-
one question
I'm sorry?
about the bond, if you don't mind.
It's not on the agenda. Could you ask it at the end when it's open to
Absolutely,
anything?
thank you.
That'd be great, thank you. So we're up to personnel, Mike, resignations.
Sure, resolved upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of the Board of Education, hereby approve the following resignations: Laura Brennan and Daniel Lowry.
A second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comment, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Non-instructional, Ed?
Non-instructional appointments, registered nurse, part-time. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointment. Christina Coburn, effective appointment date November 3rd, 2016, as a registered nurse, part-time, compensation step 1 at 26.
Second.
Thank you, Mike.
Just make a comment. The addition of this nurse is intended to cover when the nurse in the building may be on lunch or have a break, so that we have nursing staff through the school day without a break. So they'll coordinate between the buildings so that this nurse will be available during those breaks, will cover those breaks.
Thank you, Bob. It's become paramount because unfortunately more of our students have been diagnosed with diabetes, so it's important qualified staff are present during the day.
Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. School district aides, Bob?
School district aides, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointments: Carol Dionisio, substitute aide, September 27th, 2016, $10 an hour, and Kerry Lowry, school district aide, effective October 5th, 2016, step 1.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Other appointments, Pete?
Other appointments, coaches, resolved upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of the Board of Education, hereby approves the following coaching appointments: John Meades, girls basketball, October 20th, 2016, volunteer; Tom Walker, girls basketball, October 20th, 2016, volunteer.
Second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? And carries. Action items, Carrie, please.
Committee on Special Education. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education has no objections to the following special education recommendations and approves the authorization for the funds to implement the special education programs and services consistent with such as listed.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Emergency plan, Mike?
Sure, Mount Sinai Athletics Emergency Action Plan, resolved upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of the Board of Education, hereby approves the attached Mount Sinai Athletics Emergency Action Plan.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Pete. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. That would be you, Ed, obsolete equipment.
Obsolete equipment. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby declares the following items as obsolete and further authorizes disposal as listed.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. That ends the business portion of our program. We now will take questions and answers from the community. Yes.
So in terms of the timing and scope of the bond that was discussed a meeting or two ago, is there an update at this point?
The board is starting to form the composition of the committee, discussing how many people, how big it's going to be, when we're going to begin, and we're actually planning a work session in the next couple of weeks where we will discuss exactly that. It will be open to the public, but the public will not have an opportunity to comment. It will be a work session where we're working exactly on that.
So if I may, just in terms of timing, is it a year, 2 years? Any window of
The committee will, as soon as we have a resolution, which hopefully will be at our next public, I shouldn't say public, business board meeting, then that committee will be charged with getting going. And hopefully typically, from what I've read in other districts, it takes between 6 to 8 months to formalize recommendations, and they have to bring it to the board and the public. And then once a vote is taken, then we begin the work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, hi.
Couple of things. One, I sent an email about the financial statements. I received a very quick response back that they would be posted on, or they were posted on the website. They're still not there. The last thing I saw was fiscal year 13 financial statements on the website.
We did order them to be posted. I know I made that order myself, and I'll check tomorrow. You know, right after that was pointed out last time, we said we need the new ones posted, and you were right, the old one was up there. So I will find out why that didn't happen.
Okay, and the other thing is, that's a kind of concern of mine as a community under the recent tragedies that have gone on between now Port Jefferson, Miller Place, and most recent Shoreham. What are we doing as a community to educate our kids and to educate the parents to try, obviously there's no 100% way to avoid it, but to do everything that we possibly can to try to avoid it. I mean, it's not like it's just an isolated incident now. It's an epidemic at this point in such a small area to have a cluster like that in the past, 7 months now? I mean, is there any curriculum in the health classes or gym? I know the school did a great thing over the summertime with the heroin epidemic and had a big community meeting, community atmosphere. Are we able to do that for this situation?
Yes.
Because I would like, we have a nice size community here where that probably people are doctors, people are, psychiatrists, people probably see if we can bring that together and organize it to be able to use the space in the school to have that one night.
Well, you hit on a thing I've been working on very hard lately, and as with you, all the board is very concerned with that. I recall the week of the Port Jefferson, I was very close to Dr. Ken Bosser, the superintendent there, and he shared with me the day after it happened because he was afraid of the impact on our district and our kids. So I went through that with him. Most recently, Mary Ann and Miller Place. We were very close, had a great relationship, and I went through that blow by blow with her, found out all the details. As I did, I sat with the superintendent in Wading River last Friday. So all these topics are being currently discussed. So what we've done, our staff has been trained, all the counselors, social workers have been trained, psychologists, but we have rewritten, and I wasn't going to present this till next week because I put before the board this weekend a new suicide policy, suicide prevention policy, which they've seen for the first time. If they have no objection to it, and it'll be posted it'll be the first reading publicly at our next board meeting and voted on in December. That being said, I also pursued as many workshops as I can. And I do have many, and again, I'll address that in November. I hope you're here with me then. But the one that we can really benefit from is a proven entity, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I spoke to Ann Morrison today, the head of that organization, and we moved pretty quickly. They're free, there's no charge, and they're proven in many districts. Already, we've arranged training in health classes in the high school, all 8 of them, and in the middle school, where their workshops will be done in health classes. They also do a program for students and parents and teachers. We're seeing if we have room and space on Superintendent's Conference Day, just a few weeks away, to conduct the staff training. Although they've been trained, it's the policy, and when it's explained to them at every faculty meeting, it's going to heighten awareness. You know, we take the procedures they've all been doing and practicing successfully, and we put it all in writing now in a policy. But you're right, these workshops, we're going to have a parent workshop like the Narcan training, absolutely. And I think this is the foundation I'm doing. Other workshops is Shoreham Wading River, because it hits so close to home, is offering a workshop at Shoreham Wading River for teachers, counselors, psychologists. That's November 18th. On December 7th, a few of us have already signed up for a workshop in Huntington on recognizing the signs of suicide and suicide prevention. So, although we've been trained, you can always be trained more. And one thing I'm grateful for too, Ms. McGuire, is that when I see our administrators interacting with our kids in the hallway every day and looking for change and signs of depression, those kids are often brought in. The day after the Miller Place incident, or the Shoreham Wading River incident, which by the way brought it all back to Miller Place for the summer, they were very busy, all the counselors, dealing once again with that tragedy from over the summer. But Shoreham Wading River, having that workshop, you know, we will benefit by attending. Even though we're trained, we're going. And I think we're looking at many resources we can. I reached out to the North Shore Youth Council to see what they can offer us for training, because you're right, this is something that gets me every time. It's something you never get used to. It's so impacting. You know, 14, 15 years old, it's hard to understand. It's forever. And we also have those Challenge Day and Awareness Day at middle school and high school that help a lot with our kids to get them to talk. So that's what we're doing now, and it's a lot because we have to pay attention to it. You have to speak about it, you can't ignore it.
I just want to join in and my appreciation to the superintendent. This was a topic that came up as not just the Shoreham Wading River tragedy, but back in Miller Place, because it's so close to home. It's the danger of complacency, that it doesn't happen in our community. And there's no prevention that it couldn't happen in our community. The prevention is not just the training, but the awareness, and to continue to think about it and where our community as a whole, not just the teachers, not just the parents, but us all working together, pay attention to it. Because if we can intercede in one instance, that's the huge success. Tonight, there's a program over in Port Jeff, but for the board meeting, student mental health. I have been receiving it this evening through the Port Jeff Pulse is a website that you can see. It was broadcast live. Very interesting topic on the challenges of an adolescent brain. It's different than ours as adults, not just developmentally, but how it fires off and all that sort of stuff. The topic has to be talked about. We can't be afraid of it. We have to be out there in front of it. And by just bringing it up, Gordon, to your administrators that you have and having circulated all of the different programs and training that is done and is available, renews everyone's interest in it. And I think that's what's important. Not just tonight, but into the future, through the year, how we renew that interest, how we pay attention to it, so that training doesn't become complacency. Because we can't protect it. We can't prevent it. We can just make people aware of it.
Last piece, Ms. McGuire, I hope that, like the Narcan training, and I have another one scheduled, by the way, there are 90 to 100 parents at that Narcan training, which I was disappointed. There's a lot of denial going on about the heroin issue, and believe me, it's here. I'm afraid that this training for our parents, because when I mentioned you, I spoke to the 3 superintendents, and I'll guarantee you there are parental issues in all 3 cases. This decision to commit suicide didn't happen like that. There are prior issues. And so parents need to hear it. They need to hear it. I hope they come. You know, we often see what the result is on our vote. You've heard us talk about it every year. and even here at our board meetings, you know, there's a lot of not here, not around us, not my kid. But regardless of that fear, we're going to put it on, okay? And we'll have those training opportunities for parents, and I hope they come.
I agree. I think it's to the point, it's kind of sad, like you said, not our kids and stuff like that. I think sometimes, even with me, there's a disconnect with my kids. Sometimes I have to find out through social media that he had a breakup with a girl or something like that, you know, because they'll come to a teacher, you know, sometimes more than they'll come to the parent or, you know, or somebody else in the community, and you have to find out the other way. So I guess it's just trying to learn how to, you know, I'm not shy. I'll take my son's phone without asking him and go through it and stuff like that. But I think, like you said, a lot of, not my kid, not this, but a lot of these kids that commit suicide stuff, they might not even be, people wouldn't even think that because they could be the A student, they could be the B student, you know, it depends on their pressures, and like you said, our communities, that it doesn't matter demographics, whether we're in a higher income or a lower income, you know, so.
Yeah, that's not part of it. And, you know, it's a key piece too that in many of these cases there were drug and alcohol problems, which we all know leads to depression, and that leads to severe acts.
Mental health still remains a taboo subject that we dare not speak of. And the minute you stop speaking of it, the minute you don't address it as a health issue, you have that difficulty, you have that problem of it's not really here. And the more we can talk about it, not just the parent interceding, but the coach, whoever that student, that child, and I'll use the word child, is comfortable with, if they feel they have an avenue to go to, then we likely could prevent it because they have an avenue to go to. And that's what we have to teach, not just as parents, but also as coaches, teachers, and what goes on in our community. So the dialogue will continue, and we're looking at what other opportunities we can look at, not just here, but with our colleagues in other districts. But for tonight, you know, it is on the website, but on the Fort Jeff Pulse, I urge you to look at it. It's a subject matter I don't know a lot about, and I'd like to learn more about.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Just want to thank Mr. Jockers again for videotaping. When might we expect to see this work of art?
Within a week, I would
Within
think,
a
I would say.
week, okay.
Sure.
So be looking for that on the website. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I know it's late, later than we thought, but thank you for coming. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second, any comment? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Safe
Safe
home.
home.